With the release of the new Switch OLED, I wanted to go over some of my favorite accessories for the system. Some of these are things that I've talked about a few times in the past, others are slightly new additions. The main focus though is that if this is your first Switch, this is some great stuff to pick up and get started with, or if it's stuff that you just were kind of waiting on, or maybe it's a newer version that you need to get to work with the Switch OLED, that's worth grabbing. And the first thing I want to talk about and get out of the way immediately is grips. This has been one of the really big talking points about one of the differences between the Switch OLED and the original Switch. Grips are a very popular accessory to make your experience of playing the Nintendo Switch in handheld mode a lot more comfortable, because as a portable, the Switch is great. But it's not really the comfiest shape in the world. Having more traditional actual grips and handles makes for a much better experience that you can play for a much longer period of time. Now, two of the biggest companies that I've had a good experience of using their products with are Skull & Co. and Satisfy. And sadly, both of their grip designs do not work on the new Switch OLED, thanks to the fact that the OLED is just ever so slightly wider than the original model Switch, making it so that their very snug-fitting grips just can't fit around the OLED model. Now, thankfully, it looks like both companies are coming out with updated versions of these grips for the Nintendo Switch. I have not had a hands-on yet with the Satisfy one, but they have revealed it and will be coming out in November. While Skull & Co. actually did send me their new grip design a little early to check out, which is actually a really interesting change up from their previous one. Instead of being a plastic case that goes around the entirety of the Switch, it's now just a smaller, lighter weight slide-on design that not only fits the Switch OLED and the regular Switch, but it's redesigned in a way that you can still make use of the kickstand on the back of the Switch OLED as well. That's why it has that whole kind of bottom part just completely left open. Now, personally, I don't think having the kickstand availability is an absolute necessity, but I do think it's a really nice feature add-on as part of the Skull & Co. design. It's still bringing the comfort of their grip designs to make that gameplay experience just a lot better. And aesthetically, kind of matching the logic they've done with past systems, they are releasing one in a white that matches up with the Switch OLED white design, so it kind of keeps that same look going. I've talked about both these companies a lot in the past, and I really have nothing but good things to say about both designs. I think they both have some slightly unique strengths. Satisfy always likes to rely on that slightly little offset grip. Skull & Co., on the other hand, has adjustable grip sizes that you can add and remove. This new design does allow you to make use of the OLED kickstand as well. Honestly, these in my mind are some of the first buys that most people should have in mind with the Switch OLED, because it really does make a huge difference if you like playing in handheld mode. Now, an alternative option to grips like this that I have covered before is also the option of buying larger Joy-Con designs that replace the standard Joy-Cons on the system. And because those don't rely on having to slot the whole tablet into it, it just replaces where the Joy-Cons go, those work fine on the Switch OLED, no problem whatsoever. The officially licensed option that's really popular here is Horiz Split Pad Pro. It only works while being connected to the system, but it adds the ability to use a D-pad. It is a larger, differently shaped grip that is just a lot more comfortable if you have larger hands. There are remappable back buttons that you can make use of as well. All in all, a fantastic upgrade. Another option that is popular, however, comes from a company called Binbok. This is not officially licensed. However, because of that, they are sold at a very good price point for what they offer, and on top of being larger, more comfortable designs that have a remappable button, they also happen to work wirelessly as well if you want. If you don't want to wait on new grip designs, or you just like the idea of some of the additional features that these controllers offer, I definitely think this is another good way you can go to get that extra comfort, along with a couple of other features when playing on the go. Though I will say, one thing that I do like about using a grip instead is that I get to keep the Joy-Cons that I have with the system, which I think just stylistically is always a really good look. One accessory I haven't talked about in a little while that I do still really like in concept, and thankfully does work with the new Switch dock, albeit not quite as perfect of a fit as it used to be on the older one, PDP's light-up dock. One of the things that I've always kind of complained a little bit about with Switch docks is that sometimes I feel like the Switch dock design is just a little too plain, and even when it comes to official collector's editions of systems, I feel like Nintendo plays it very safe. And the PDP light-up dock is something I think is a really cool option that not only looks cool, but because it's not actually a dock, it's just an add-on that you put the regular dock inside of, you're not worried about, you know, all the fears of using a third-party dock that might brick a Switch. There are a couple designs of this that they released, and they do come in 2 packs. They did one that had a Mario Odyssey and Legend of Zelda design, which I really liked, but they have a Pokemon-inspired one too that looks really nice. One thing about these that I will warn, they absolutely work better with the black dock design. Using it with the new white dock, it fits fine, a little differently from before, but still works. But unlike the new black dock or the original black dock, Because it's white, it doesn't really offer the same contrast with the colorful lights. It works, the black dock just plays a lot better with it. One pair of accessories I always like to recommend as being sort of the necessity options that I do think most people should try to pick up is a screen protector and a micro SD card. Now, with the Switch OLED, I've been seeing a little more dialogue and questions, people wondering whether or not these things are as necessary as they were before, and it's a little give and take. The Switch OLED does have a glass screen now, which is better than the plastic screen on other Switch models, but given the fact that you are still constantly putting that in and taking it out of the dock, and it's something you might use on the go, I still think it is an excellent idea to use a screen protector just to give it that little extra bit of safety. The last thing you want to do is think that you're totally fine and then end up, however many months later realizing, oh, I scratched up the screen a little bit. There are lots of screen protector options out there. One option that I have and I'm using is from Dbrand because in all honesty, they sent it to me to check out, which is great. Their packaging is very over the top, but it is a great screen protector. In general, my main kind of thing I really recommend though is just, if you're gonna grab any screen protector, make sure it's a glass one. There are name brand ones that can sound fancier and maybe are at least a higher quality, but as long as the one you're grabbing is a glass one and not a plastic one, that's going to get its main job accomplished. When it comes to the design of screen protectors, one thing that I was asked a lot was whether or not screen protectors for the original Switch would work on the Switch OLED, and honestly, no, not really. The cutout design is a little different because the speaker design is different on the OLED versus the original Switch. The screen is larger on the OLED, even though it does accomplish this by mostly getting rid of the bezel that's on the regular Switch, and like I mentioned earlier, the OLED is ever so slightly wider. Point of the matter is, you should just go out and buy a new screen protector designed for the OLED and not just try to repurpose one you have from the regular Switch. It's just the better way to go. Now, as for a micro SD card, the Switch OLED does now come with a larger internal storage than the previous Switch did, but honestly, in my mind, it's still not really enough. If you're mostly just playing small indie games and you really rely on buying physical cards for most of your games, you actually can probably get by for quite a while without a micro SD card. But for the peace of mind and just never having to worry about deleting anything, I think it's a really good idea to pick up for the system. That way, whenever you buy DLC, if you do buy any larger games digitally, stuff's just gonna add up over time and take up more and more space, and that's just going to remove that problem from the equation. Going back to controllers, because that really is, I think, one of the biggest things you could invest in for a system, another thing that comes up really often is people wanting a D-pad. For whatever reason, Nintendo has not released an official Joy-Con design that has a D-pad. They have a D-pad on the Switch Lite, but they haven't made that option available for regular Joy-Cons on a regular Switch just yet. However, there are some options you can pick up to make this work. In particular, Horiz, along with their Split Pad Pro, do also offer a single Joy-Con design that offers a D-pad that must be connected to the Switch. One downside of this is it does have a slightly different shape, and so it doesn't work with all grips or cases that go around the Switch. But if you don't mind playing without any kind of grips and you just want to have a D-pad on the system, this is a very straightforward solution that I like. If you want to be very extra, there are mod kits out there that allow you to do a shell exchange that doesn't replace how the button mechanisms work, but does replace the 4 buttons for directionals with a full-size D-pad. It still gives you the same clicky feedback, and it doesn't really work like a true D-pad, but it does get you closer to the feeling and vibe of using one. You just have to open up a Joy-Con and do a shell exchange, which may or may not be very terrifying if you haven't done that before. And of course, using Joy-Cons isn't the only way to play on your Switch. If you're playing in dock mode, there are a variety of Pro controllers you can pick up. There are a couple different ones that I really enjoy. To be honest, I think just using the regular official Switch Pro controller is a very solid option. If you want to go for something different though, one of my personal favorites is the 8BitDo Pro 2. This is their latest controller design, and really, despite the fact that it's not an officially licensed product, is one of the best controllers available on the Switch in my opinion. It's got a fantastic D-pad, it's got a cool looking retro design, remappable back buttons, wireless support, it comes with a rechargeable battery, but you can slot in AA's if you prefer. It's just all around a very solid, great controller, especially for the price point. If you prefer something that's officially licensed but also a little bit cheaper, I think the PowerA wireless controllers do a really solid job of just being a decent all-rounder controller that does also offer the benefits of remappable back buttons on the back. They also come in a variety of really cool looking designs. One other accessory I want to talk about real quick, and it's not one that I really push a ton anymore, but I've had a lot of people ask me questions about this, so I figured we might as well cover it. Carrying cases. There are so many different carrying cases that exist for the Switch, and ultimately, most of them get the basic job done as far as something that will protect the Switch, something that gives you a place to carry game carts. There are options out there that do offer a little more storage that are really nice, but the big question I've really gotten on this is what ones will work with my Switch OLED, and honestly, as far as my own personal experience has gone, all of them. Carrying cases by design are not really meant to be super snug and fit like grips are on the Switch, and at least all the ones that I own and have tested, the Switch OLED fits in perfectly fine. Yes, it maybe brushes against the sides a tiny bit more because it's a little bit wider, but not in any kind of way that worries me.